The Federal Reserve is about to make its most politically charged decision in decades, and Donald Trump is pulling out all the stops to get what he wants. In what economists are calling the first U.S. interest rate cut since Trump became president again, the Fed is expected to bow to unprecedented White House pressure this Wednesday. But this isn't just about economics anymore. This is about the systematic destruction of Federal Reserve independence, and Trump is winning. While the world focuses on a massive 36-hour global interest rate marathon, with central banks from Canada to Japan making critical policy decisions, all eyes are on Jerome Powell and whether he'll cave to Trump's relentless demands. Starting with the Bank of Canada on Wednesday, then shifting to the Federal Reserve, followed by the Bank of England and ending with the Bank of Japan, central banks controlling half of the world's most traded currencies are about to reshape global monetary policy. But the Fed's decision carries the highest stakes because it's happening under the most intense political pressure any central bank has faced in modern history. Trump has turned the Federal Reserve into his personal punching bag, and the results are devastating. The president has spent months launching unprecedented attacks on Fed Chair Jerome Powell, the same Jerome Powell that Trump himself nominated in 2017. But now, Trump calls him too late and has repeatedly threatened to fire him, something no president has ever attempted in the Fed's 112-year history. The pressure campaign has been relentless, personal, and designed to break the institution's independence. The numbers tell the story of Trump's desperation. He's demanding a 3 percentage point rate cut, not the modest quarter-point reduction economists expect, but a massive economic stimulus that would save the government over $1 trillion annually on debt payments. Trump isn't hiding his motivations. During his extraordinary visit to the Fed's headquarters in July, he stood next to Powell and declared, "We should have the lowest interest rate. And if you took it down 3 points, not a little bit, but 3 points, we would save more than $1 trillion. That visit itself was unprecedented. Only the fourth presidential visit to the Fed since 1937, Trump used it as a public humiliation campaign against Powell. Standing in front of cameras, Trump waved documents claiming the Fed's renovation costs had ballooned to $3.1 billion, while Powell visibly shook his head in disagreement. The spectacle was designed to undermine Powell's credibility and create grounds for his removal. But Trump's assault on Fed independence goes far deeper than public theatrics. The administration has launched a systematic campaign to reshape the central bank's leadership.
This is a dark moment for America. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now. My administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and support it, as well as those who go after our judges, law enforcement officials, and everyone else who brings order to our country.
This represents a dark moment for American economic governance, where political rhetoric has replaced reasoned policy debate. The administration's aggressive stance toward institutional independence mirrors patterns seen in other contexts where federal authority has been weaponized for political purposes. Trump has moved to fire Fed Governor Lisa Cook over unproven mortgage fraud allegations, an unprecedented step that legal experts say violates the Fed's independence protections. Cook has filed a lawsuit, and a federal judge issued a preliminary injunction allowing her to continue serving, but Trump's message is clear: comply or face removal. Meanwhile, Trump has secured Senate confirmation for Stephen Moran, a White House economic advisor, to join the Fed's Board of Governors. Moran has pledged to maintain Fed independence while simultaneously refusing to resign from his Trump administration role, a contradiction that reveals the administration's true intentions. With Cook potentially removed and Moran confirmed, Trump would control a majority of the Fed's 7-member board, giving him unprecedented influence over monetary policy. The economic data Trump is using to justify his demands tells a different story than his public claims. While the president insists energy is way down, groceries are down, everything, almost everything, is way down, the reality is more complex. Inflation rose again in August, complicating the Fed's decision-making process. Consumer prices increased 2.7% year over year in June, higher than the previous month, and the Fed's preferred inflation measure has trended further from their 2% target since spring. The labor market data that Trump cites as justification for rate cuts actually reveals economic weakness that should concern any president. Job creation has been anemic, with just 22,000 jobs added in August and significant downward revisions to previous months. July saw only 79,000 jobs added, and June was revised to show the economy actually lost 13,000 jobs. These aren't signs of the booming economy Trump claims to have created. They're warning signals that his policies may be undermining economic growth. Trump's tariff policies are creating the exact inflationary pressures the Fed is trying to combat. Powell has been explicit about this connection, stating that tariffs have caused all inflation forecasts for the United States up materially. The Fed went on hold when we saw the size of the tariffs, Powell explained, because importers typically pass along higher tax burdens through price increases. This creates a vicious cycle where Trump's trade policies force the Fed to maintain higher rates, which Trump then attacks as politically motivated. The international implications of Trump's Fed pressure campaign are staggering. As central banks worldwide make coordinated policy decisions this week, America's traditional leadership role in global monetary policy is being undermined by political interference. The Bank of Canada and Norway are expected to cut rates by similar amounts to what the Fed might deliver, but they're doing so based on economic data, not political pressure. The Bank of England will likely hold rates steady after a previous cut that featured a rare three-way split among officials, while the Bank of Japan remains on a gradual tightening path. China is watching this chaos with keen interest. As U.S. and Chinese representatives meet for economic talks in Madrid, just after China launched investigations targeting the U.S. semiconductor sector, America's central bank independence crisis provides Beijing with diplomatic leverage. When the world's largest economy can't maintain the basic institutional norms that underpin global financial stability, it weakens America's position in international negotiations. The precedent Trump is setting extends far beyond his presidency. Fed independence has been considered essential for maintaining credibility with financial markets and the public since the central bank's creation in 1913. The staggered terms for Fed governors and legal protections against removal except for cause were designed to insulate monetary policy from political pressure. Previous presidents understood that attacking the Fed's independence could lead to the kind of inflation and economic instability that destroyed economies in other countries. The 1950s provide a cautionary tale about presidential interference with Fed independence. President Harry Truman attempted to force the Fed to keep interest rates artificially low to finance the Korean War, even summoning the entire Federal Open Market Committee to the White House, something no president had ever done before. The action caused deep anxiety in financial markets and was considered a serious breach of Fed independence. The crisis was eventually resolved with the 1951 Treasury-Fed Accord that established clear boundaries between political and monetary authorities. Trump is now threatening to tear up the accord. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has called for a revamp of the Fed, while potential Powell replacement Kevin Warsh has argued for a new Treasury-Fed Accord to replace the 1951 agreement that shaped central bank independence. These aren't minor policy adjustments. They represent a fundamental restructuring of American monetary policy that would give the president direct control over interest rates. The immediate consequences of Trump's pressure campaign are already visible in financial markets. When Trump announced his intention to fire Lisa Cook, both the U.S. dollar and long-term Treasury bonds fell as investors worried about the erosion of Fed independence. Market volatility has increased as traders struggle to separate economic fundamentals from political interference in their Fed predictions. The CME FedWatch tool shows a 96% chance of a quarter-point rate cut this week, but that probability reflects political pressure as much as economic necessity. Powell's position has become untenable. If the Fed cuts rates now, it appears to be capitulating to Trump's pressure. undermining its credibility for future decisions. If it maintains rates, Trump's attacks will intensify, potentially succeeding in damaging Powell's public reputation and the Fed's institutional standing. A White House official explicitly told Politico that highlighting the Fed's renovation costs was designed to damage this guy's image. The political environment surrounding the Fed has fundamentally changed. While congressional Republicans generally defended Powell against Trump's attacks during the president's first term, many of those defenders have retired. At least 4 Senate Republicans are now calling for Powell's resignation, creating a hostile political environment that previous Fed chairs never faced. The traditional bipartisan support for Fed independence has collapsed under Trump's sustained assault. Powell's term as Fed chair expires in May 2026, but his term as a Fed governor continues until 2028. He has refused to reveal whether he plans to remain on the board after losing the chairmanship, but the uncertainty itself weakens his position. Trump is actively searching for Powell's replacement, with candidates like Scott Bessent and Kevin Warsh already positioning themselves as alternatives who would be more responsive to White House demands. Trump's demands for massive rate cuts aren't about economic policy. They're about using monetary policy as a political tool to boost his re-election chances and reduce government borrowing costs.
And, we've taken close to 1,500 people out of D.C., but when I saw the result happen so quickly, and so many people are so thankful, and people that you pass them every day and they're fine, all of a sudden they're thanking me so profusely. It was so exciting what's happened and continues to be what happened in D.C., and so that's what makes this, I think, even more exciting, because we know what's going to happen. We have the people. Look, we're sending in a lot of help. These cities have been taken over for years, and the last 4 years under Biden, what's happened is just a disgrace. So it really has, the success we've had here has made it to me much more exciting.
This approach mirrors other instances where the administration has claimed dramatic success in addressing complex problems through aggressive federal intervention, often without regard for institutional norms or long-term consequences. The broader implications for American democracy are profound.
The team that the president has put together has no equal today or anywhere in American history. I think what's happening here is that what the president has done is made clear. The power of federal law enforcement that was used for the last 4 years to harass and attack conservatives, to harass and attack Christians, to go after law-abiding families. The power of law enforcement under President Trump is going to be used to get all the criminals, all the violent offenders, all the murderers, all the cartels, and all the domestic terrorists off our streets. So whether you're Antifa, whether you're a domestic terrorist, whether you are a violent gang member, a drug trafficker, a trained Iraqwa killer, or anyone else that's threatening our people, President Trump is saying he's going to use his FBI, his DOD, his ATF, his DEA to wipe you out, to put you in behind bars, to take you off the street, or to apply whatever legal consequences necessary. Mr. President, I'm honored beyond words to be a part of this team under your leadership as you've saved thousands of lives.
Thank you very much. Come on over, let's sign.
When federal law enforcement power and economic policy tools are redirected for political purposes, it fundamentally alters the balance of power in American governance. The Federal Reserve's independence has been a cornerstone of American economic credibility for over a century. When political leaders can pressure central bankers into making decisions based on electoral considerations rather than economic fundamentals, it undermines the entire foundation of monetary policy. Countries around the world look to the Federal Reserve as a model of institutional independence, and Trump's attacks are damaging America's soft power globally. The global financial system depends on the dollar's reserve currency status, which in turn depends on confidence in American institutions. When the president publicly humiliates the Fed chair, threatens to fire governors, and demands politically motivated policy changes, it raises questions about the dollar's long-term stability. China and other rivals are already working to develop alternative financial systems that could challenge dollar dominance, and Trump's institutional vandalism provides them with additional motivation and justification. This week's Fed decision will be remembered as a turning point in American monetary policy. Whether Powell caves to Trump's demands or maintains institutional independence, the precedent has been set for future presidential interference. The 36-hour global central banking marathon may determine policy settings for half the world's currencies, but the real test is whether American democratic institutions can survive Trump's authoritarian assault. The Federal Reserve was designed to be independent precisely because monetary policy requires long-term thinking that extends beyond electoral cycles. When presidents can pressure central bankers into boosting the economy before elections or financing government spending through artificially low rates, it creates the boom-bust cycles that devastate working families. The international community is watching this crisis unfold with growing alarm. Central bank independence is considered a fundamental requirement for modern economic management, and America's retreat from this principle sends shockwaves through global financial markets. When the world's largest economy abandons basic institutional norms, it creates uncertainty that affects investment decisions, trade relationships, and international cooperation on everything from climate change to pandemic response. Trump's pressure campaign represents more than just another political controversy. It's an assault on the institutional foundations that have made America's economy the envy of the world. The Federal Reserve's independence isn't just a bureaucratic nicety, it's a crucial component of the system that has delivered decades of relative economic stability. When that independence is compromised by political pressure, the entire edifice of American economic leadership comes under threat. As central banks around the world make their decisions this week, they're not just setting interest rates, they're defining the future of monetary policy independence in an era of rising authoritarianism. The Federal Reserve's decision will be scrutinized not just for its economic implications, but for what it reveals about America's commitment to the institutio, null norms that have underpinned global financial stability for generations. Trump may get his rate cut, but the price could be the destruction of Federal Reserve independence. And with that destruction comes questions about whether authorities can maintain any semblance of institutional integrity when political pressure becomes this intense. The erosion of these norms represents a fundamental shift in how American governance operates, one that will have consequences far beyond this week's monetary policy decision.